magnetically potent, dynamically electric, a centralizing force of the will and the plan and that of leadership. These are all words and phrases that correspond to the developed man or woman born in the sign Leo. So if you want to learn more about the lion and the sign of the God Self, keep watching. So Leo is quite an interesting sign in relationship to humanity, and within our 12 signs of the zodiac, it is the only sign that is ruled by the same planet at all three levels of expression. The sun at the orthodox, soul and hierarchical levels. However, at the soul and hierarchical levels, the sun serves as a vehicle of force, penetration, a lens to two other planets. So we could say it veils, we say that similarly with the moon, but it's quite different in that it's the sun is active in its force, but it's combining or it's serving as that lens function for two other planets. But let's start with exoteric orthodox personality Leo. So we're talking about the me here. Now, actually at all three levels, Leo has all to do with self-consciousness. It moves out of Cancer, where we've got mass consciousness, the gate into incarnation, into individualization, where we have this point of centralization in contrast with that kind of diffusion that we had in Cancer in the mass consciousness. So from the level of the personality, and this has to do with the sun's influence on the human kingdom and the animal kingdom as well. From the orthodox point of view or the exoteric point of view, the sun has this strong relationship to anima mundi, the world soul, and the animal body. So that includes the human being, as the human being is part animal from the diaphragm below. Okay, so that means that the sun, this is why the sun typically has that some degree of reflection of the nature of the body, or the basic exhalation into the physical nature of oneself. That's why we say the sun sign is the path of least resistance for the individual. And that's because it has to do with the basic rest of the physical nature. And so in Leo, from this point of view, orthodox point of view, there is the sense of the me from the point of view of the personality. Now, in truth, there isn't really any actual self-consciousness here. There is all about the me, but from the point of view of identification with the form. And so that has to do with the desires and whims of the emotional nature. And in actual fact, there's a lack of individuation that's happened here. True occult individuation would be to be aware of the true self, and that true self is the soul, is the divine self, which is the hint at the esoteric movement of Leo. But from the personality, there's the centralizing mechanism, as Leo will always have this centralizing mechanism, but it's to the lower self. So this is where we have the egocentricist, the look at me, the basic creative desires of the person. And there is a sensitivity in Leo, which can be a bit surprising to hear, because we usually associate sensitivity with, let's say, a more watery sign, emotional nature. But with the Leo person, that individual sensitivity has to do with the way in which the self is interacting with the environment and the way in which the environment is responding to the personality, at least from this exoteric point of view. So it's a sensitivity in terms of who am I and what am I doing and how does this react to me and how do I react to that? So it's still a kind of centralizing consciousness, you see, but it's about me in relationship to the other things. And this is where we have that accentuation of the desire nature from the personality perspective in Leo. And it's what I want and my desires. Sometimes Leo is associated with, and a little bit like Taurus, it's a slightly different mechanism in Taurus, where in Taurus we have the desire for owning things, for substance, but it's more of the pure immersion with that sensual aspect, whereas in Leo it has to do with particularly more of that self-consciousness, but not really, but about the me in relationship to the thing a little bit more. So whereas in Taurus it could be like just the food and the shiny, it's a little bit more instinctual almost, the raw, the bull of desire versus me and my desires and what I like, and yes I'll have that, and yes I'll have that. So there's a slight similarity there, but the core movement is different. So Leo can be very much about me and my selfish desires and what I want to do, and all of this that we come to know and often love with Leo. There is a certain magnetic pull that the Leonian does have, and that's once again coming back to that sensitivity to environment and the way in which there's this accentuation of the animal body through that exoteric pull of the sun with the lower three centers. The symbol of Leo is of course the lion, and we think about lions, they are very magnetic. The male lion who's the leader of the pride, quite lazy, interestingly enough, as well as having all of this latent force and power, which becomes important when we play with this esoterically, which we shall do in a minute. But there is a phrase that the Tibetan quotes in relationship to Leo, which is as follows: "The lion must emerge from its lair." And so there is this thing that can happen with Leo, either the personality Leo or even the aspiring Leo who's trying to move in relationship to the soul at the earlier phases of that process. A trap of laziness can be the case. And this comes down to the centralizing movement of Leo, where it has all to do with the being. I just am. I am. Like the radiating sun. It's just, I am this magnetic, awesome, centralizing, gravitational force. And that can lead to the problem where self-discipline is lacking, to a sort of expectation that things should just happen for me. I am awesome as I am, and so things should just happen. Hence, the lion must emerge from its lair. And so this developing point for Leo has a lot to do with discipline. Interestingly, as the Tibetan has gone into depth with in the books, Leo has a very intense need to be the ruler of itself. The ruler of itself. And in this potency of self-consciousness, they can be very resistant to external discipline or external control from other forces. They're not good followers. What this means though is that they need to source discipline internally. So they have to get their motivations right. And this is where more of the esoteric movements come in through Leo, where there has to be the recognition of the true self. Otherwise, the motivations are weak. Because from the personality point of view, we just have the emotional desires. That's not to say that you can't have selfish Leonian individuals moving from the personality that aren't dynamically potent. It's the same thing. They just need a lot of internally sourced discipline in relationship to, whatever desires they have really. And we can see that Leonian not difficulty, but the shadow of that Leonian archetype with certain dictators or leaders where they have that desire to rule and conquer, where it's expressing in that exoteric way, so to speak. So Leo needs to develop self-discipline and find the right motivating forces. And when they do this, they have this immense power, as does the lion, right? When they really get moving, they can be quite terrifying and frightening, albeit lazy in other pockets of how they hang out in their lives. This power of synthesis is hinted at in the polar opposite sign, Aquarius. Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. And we've got the Jupiter force there too, second ray. There's an affinity there with the sun as the other second ray planet. This ability to synthesize and wield the group forces, this is very Uranian, and Leo individuals very much have that ability even at the level of the personality, and this is why they are such dynamically potent creators and can synthesize and be, rule a group. One obvious shadow of this expression that even the Tibetan uses is Hitler, actually, utilizing a Leonian force and like synthesizing the German population. It's a really shadow expression of the Aquarian forces there, but nonetheless, the potency and the power of it is obvious. Another example would be cults. We mentioned this in the Aquarius video, where we have the over-the-top Leonian ruler and the diffused mass movements of people who aren't individualized enough, and so they project that God archetype onto Leo, the Leo type of individual. So those sorts of individuals, whether or not they're born in Leo or have Sun and Rising, they're always going to have Leo somewhere potent in the chart, or the relationship of the Sun to other pieces in the chart will be particularly prominent. And so they, to the degree that they have a fragmented psyche and are selfish in their motivations and movements, they can still attract that projection of the God self from those who aren't particularly individualized. So when we're talking about the evolution that Leo has to make, or the Leonian individual awakening to soul consciousness, we are talking again about self-consciousness, but the awareness of the true self. And the true self is the soul. And this is where we get the true notion of the divine right to rule. Interesting that this has been echoed through monasteries, where there's been the kings and queens. The inversion of this is some idea like it has to do with bloodline, right? And then you have the historical interesting things of the inbreeding of the royals. Of course, it's actually the soul that rules. And to the degree that there is a king that exists, a literal king, the good king will always be a recipient of God and be the one who is most sacrificial to the God principle. That's what makes a good king. The bad king, of course, and this is brilliantly, the whole Leonian problem and development is beautifully told in The Lion King. They really got the archetypes right there, where the evil, resentful brother Scar, who's clever, but he's not courageous or has the oomph or the love for the kingdom enough to be a good ruler. He just wants the power for himself, and when he becomes the king through his manipulation, the whole kingdom dies. All the food, the water, all of this, the feminine aspect of life decays, and this is a reflection of poor leadership. Whereas the good king, everything thrives and everything is brought into balance. And herein lies the key word for Leo on the path: sacrifice, or one of the key words. A self-sacrificing unit where there is a constant receiving of and giving out the God principle. The sun at the level of the soul veils or is a lens for the energies of Neptune. Neptune, a sixth ray planet, a single pointed focused line of love. Devotion, sacrifice, a surrendering to the soul. I am that. I am the soul. And this opening of the heart center that comes with that. And we've echoed this through discussions on Neptune and the sixth ray and the second degree initiation. It is said that when the individual is responding to this fundamental movement of the sun, where that the personality as the physical body and the lower three centers elevating up, and the letting go into the heart, receiving the soul via the Sutratma. This is when someone is getting ready for the second degree initiation, where there is the deep purging of all of you're heading into discipleship and a hinted relationship with Scorpio here. Okay, so Neptune, and in that the sun and the Leo person, a great sacrifice. The personality is sacrificed, and we're moving into a universal love. And there's a hint there: the good king has a universal love and compassion for his, the kingdom that he reigns and all the people within it. And so here we see the divine right to rule is that the divine self rules. God rules. God rules the man. So the God man, the potential for this in Leo. So that's the individual awakening to the soul and moving into that soul-centered level. The hierarchical planet that has strong influence in Leo, where the sun becomes a lens for Uranus, even strengthening even further that link to Aquarius and the polarity there. But also it is the planet of occultism, right? And the intuitive mind. And so the surrendering of the lower self, universal love through Neptune, and then the ability to have that dynamic intuition. And here we have the seventh ray is the creator ray, the magic ray, differentiated, focused point of I'm getting messages, let me just mute this. Uranus, the focus differentiated point of the first ray, the magic planet, the manifestor planet, magic, ceremonial order, synthesis, and that which is intuited by the will, and the first ray piece of the divine plan brought right into form. So once again, the mastery in Leo, or the polarization and identification with the soul and then spirit itself, and in that the capacity to rule and then become a master of the environment. So coming back to this point that we mentioned earlier with the sensitivity in Leo, the sensitivity of self to environment. So from the exoteric point of view, it's about that me and the outer forms and the connection to the outer forms. Second degree, or connecting to the soul, connection to Neptune, sensitivity to the inner plane, the inner self and the soul, going, who am I really? So it's actually a movement away from form, and this is the evolution that Leo makes from the material plane and materialism to the letting go of all materialism, right? Moving into spiritual values, spiritual love, detachment from materiality, and then, so sensitivity to the soul, and then becoming sensitive to spirit, and in that coming back to a sensitivity with environment, where its seventh ray has to do with the physical plane. But now it's the connection of the will and that which we've gone a full sacrifice into, the will, the God aspect into form. And so here we have we have the white magician in Taurus, and then we've got this master creator, master of the environment in Leo from this point of view. And so you can still have shadowy Leonian individuals, but they're somewhat beginning to respond to some of the esoteric impulses that's connected through Leo. It's why it's such a powerful sign. And the Tibetan says that the Leonian individual, when they're moving with the self-discipline, they're just able to create. They're just able to manifest their goal, which is why, again, it is such a powerful sign. And you'll find that Leos will, in some way, shape or form, be at the center of something, whether it's a big group or a small group, or if it's a new kind of inventive field, bringing a new archetype through. There's always going to be something like that going on with the Leonian individual. We have that here with my husband, who is a double Leo, right? Really strong, soul-centered individual. We both have 12th house suns. We both had when we met, we'd been going through that Neptunian experience, connecting to, it was a very mystical path at that point. He was writing a lot of poetry. And what's so interesting is that I can totally see the Uranian pieces coming through with him. And there's just this innate trust that everyone here has in my husband to just make things happen. He just is able to hold all of this potency, and he goes, oh yeah, this is going to happen. Bam. And deeply intuitive. He does a lot of work with money, which is a seventh rate subject matter, and he does trading and all of these very complicated things which I don't really understand. And his process for that, there's no way you could box it up and sell it. He has this like inner meditation, and he just has a complete intuition, a feeling intuition about what move to make. He goes, this, boom. And for him to have gotten to that point, he went through all kinds of emotional purification, especially with money as such a dense subject matter, right? You have all of the fear of loss or scarcity, all of that material which comes up. So he went through a big burning ground through all of that. So he's just completely empty around it. And it's not about getting money for him now. It's like as soon as money comes in, oh, now we're going to go and do this thing. So it's just constant movement, and with this very clear goal in mind about where we're going. And we've got a little group here. It's myself, my child, got a family member here and a friend here. So it's a little group, but he is definitely this solar force at the center of it. And it's not in any kind of inverted hierarchy. You know, it's not like he's a cult leader or we're worshipping him. He's just got that Leonian gravitational presence and that trust and reliability. And reliability is a first ray quality, which is one of the rays to express through Leo. And because he's gone through such a process and he's so in alignment with the divine values and so unselfish, that makes him a reliable leader. And this day and age, you know, we've kind of grown out of the monastic time. But there is this thing of who actually does make a good leader, and is it actually right to have everyone being equal? Let's say the equality of outcome fallacy. But whereas some people are just good at leading and they're good at making decisions, and when you have a good leader, as we talked about with the Lion King reference, it allows for everything else to blossom. And I find that that's the case because my husband is able to hold all of this point of power and be able to master, be in leadership of so many aspects of the environment here. Everyone else is just able to rest into themselves more and let their own beauty shine. And I think that's a beautiful thing about the true Leonian type, is that what they will help everyone else's sun to shine, because they are a reflective point of the divine recognition. They are a constant reminder and anchor point of what the soul is and what the spirit is and what God is, and the benevolence and the service and the sacrifice of that. So a beautiful, beautiful sign when the Leo person has evolved through any egocentric selfishness and materialistic values. So the rays 1 and 5, and those have to do with that, the will, obviously, which is pretty clear from the discussion we've just had how that works. And then 5 is concrete knowledge, in this case the relationship to the true self and the knowing, capital K, knowing. That's concrete knowledge. And that's part of that centralizing self. I know who I am as a soul, and that is unbendable, and no one can tell me otherwise. I know who I am as the God self. No one can tell me otherwise. Of course, the exoteric point of view would be, I know who I am, and I'm very self-conscious, but they're driven by the desire nature, so not really, right? So because it is this sign of ruling and this central point of the God recognition, there's this kind of completion implied with Leo, and that's why there's no obvious exaltations or falls. There is it is said that Uranus and Saturn can be lessened in this sign, but here's for a couple of reasons. One, Saturn as the mental principle, the concrete, the third ray has a lot to do with mind and law and order. The implication here is that the mind bends and is sacrificed esoterically to the soul and to the will of God. You know, that the mind and concrete mentation is always a servant to that which is the higher ruler and beyond the mind. The same thing with Uranus. However, Uranus is actually a positive influence, or a more potent influence, for the developing or soul-centered or spirit-centered person in Leo, because of what we talked about with the sun being the hierarchical ruler. Uranus being connected with the sun in the hierarchical rulership of Leo, and the development of the intuition. So that lessening of Uranus only has to do with that exoteric level, where to whatever degree Uranus is still connected to the cleverness of mind, is still subservient to the meanness of Leo there. The keynotes, exoterically, let other forms exist, I rule because I am. Esoteric keynote, I am that, and that am I. Or I am that, and that am I. Vertical axis. No more to be said, yeah? Mastery of the environment is such a key thing with Leo, being able to rule its environment, always able to bring out what it needs, because that is what God does. That is what the recognition of the greatest self is able to do, because there is a fusion, 7th ray, Uranus, with spirit and matter here. And if we were to perfectly summarize the development from ordinary man to spiritual man for Leo, it's really that thing that Christ said, which is, not my will, but thine be done. Surrendering of the lower individuality for the true individuality, which is the awareness of the soul.